All right, let's dive into a pretty controversial theological argument today. We're going to be looking at the nature of the soul, all based on a really specific interpretation of the Bible. Now, our goal here isn't to say whether it's right or wrong, but to really walk through the logic step by step, just as the source material lays it out.
So the whole argument we're about to unpack, it all starts from one single provocative question. It's a question that comes from a really challenging reading of the scriptures. And there it is. That's the question that kicks this whole thing off. The rest of what we're going to talk about is all focused on unpacking the answer, an answer that is built on a very, very literal and specific reading of the text.
To build its case, the argument goes right back to the beginning, to Adam's divine creation. In this view, this isn't just a story. It's presented as a totally unique event, completely distinct from everything that comes after it.
This verse right here, Genesis 2:7, is the absolute cornerstone of the entire argument. The source material basically puts every single part of this sentence under a microscope to make its case, starting with, who exactly was being created.
So here's the first crucial point, and it's a linguistic one. The argument is that the original Hebrew text uses the specific name Adam, not just a general term for man. And why does that matter? Because it suggests this wasn't about creating all of mankind. No, this was a personal, one-on-one interaction between God and a single person.
So what did this super-personal creation result in? A living soul. Now, in this framework, that term isn't just some poetic phrase. It's a technical one. It means Adam received a literal piece of God, a divine spark that creates this direct, unbroken connection to his Creator. He's literally part of God. Okay, so now that the idea of man as a living soul has been laid out, the argument turns to the creation of woman. And it's presented as a fundamentally different event, a different process, different materials, everything. And this is the key verse they use for the creation of woman. The big emphasis here is on her origin. See, unlike Adam, she wasn't formed from dust and divine breath. She was taken out of man. This chart really breaks down the core distinction they're making. You see, on one side, Adam's creation is presented as divine. It comes directly from God. It uses dust and that divine breath, and the result is a living soul. Woman's creation, on the other hand, is shown as derived. It comes from man, it uses bone and flesh, and the result is what the source calls a living spirit. A different thing entirely. So, the argument's conclusion from this is that this difference in origin creates a kind of hierarchy. Man, since he was created directly by God, is made in the image of God. But woman, created from man, is therefore made in the image of man.
Well, this obviously raises a pretty big question, right? If only man has this living soul, that divine spark we talked about, what does that mean for a woman's connection to God? How does a living spirit find its way back to the divine?
The argument anticipates this exact question, and it proposes that women do have a connection to the divine. But the pathway is totally different, and it's a path that is defined entirely by her relationship to man. The path they propose is through marriage. Based on Genesis 2:24, when a man and a woman become one flesh, it's seen as way more than just a physical thing. It's a spiritual merging where, according to this view, they become a single entity, and they share not just a body, but his soul. And to try and reinforce this idea, the source points to the book of Numbers. It highlights verses that say a husband has the authority to either approve or cancel his wife's vows, specifically vows that bind her soul. This is presented as biblical proof of the husband's role as the spiritual head of the union. So from this point, the argument makes a huge pivot. It goes from theology to sociology. It argues that ignoring this divinely established order of creation, well, that's led directly to a ton of problems we see in the modern world. An essential piece of this societal argument is their interpretation of the word helpmate. The source argues this doesn't mean an equal partner at all. It means a literal assistant, a helpmeet for him, someone created specifically to support man in his divine purpose. So what happens when this divine structure gets disrupted? When women, as they say, step out of her place? According to this view, the result is chaos. The source directly links this disruption to so many modern issues: families falling apart, societies collapsing, and a huge rise in loneliness for both men and women. And the source claims this is no accident. It argues that modern systems, everything from our laws to social norms, are part of an intentional effort to override God's law. And the specific goal, in this view, is to break that family structure and pull men and women out of the roles God supposedly gave them.
And so there you have it. What started with a specific linguistic take on a single verse, Genesis 2:7, balloons into a complete framework for spirituality, for family, and for society. It's just a powerful example of how one single premise can be used to build an entire worldview. It really leaves us with a final question, doesn't it? How does one's interpretation of a single verse end up shaping an entire worldview?